Well, hey, God has called us to be involved in the process, especially in a constitutional republic like we live in America. We have a responsibility to be a part of the solutions when we see a lot of problems. And very important that pastors engage. We have a pastor with us today that has been very much engaged, very much a part of the solutions, and I'm very glad to know him, Pastor Jose Velasquez. Pastor Jose, thank you for being with us.
Pastor Tim, it's such a pleasure to be here, and really an honor. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, so before we get rolling, tell us a little bit more about you. You have a church in Temecula, and you got a lot going on. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I've been a bivocational pastor for many years up until recently. In January, I began just solely pastoring our church, Mosaic Church, here in the city of Temecula. It's been probably the best 5 months of my life, to be honest. It's just been such a fun time, and God has been moving and doing so many things in our church, including what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, so we talk about the various problems. We've got a lot of problems here in California and in our nation.
Yeah.
I don't often agree with Gavin Newsom, but one of the things he said I do agree with. He says, as California goes, so goes the nation.
That's right.
And while that can be a very bad thing for our nation, it can also be a very good thing, especially when men of God like yourself step up to be a part of the solution. We can set us on a different trajectory.
Yeah.
And I really firmly believe that we can have great revival here in California.
Yes, amen.
I really believe we look at the past revivals, the past great awakenings in America. Back during the Revolutionary War, there was a great fire of revival through the New York area that is known as the burned over district.
Yeah.
And I believe Southern California can be the burned over district in this revival.
Yeah,
so
right.
I think it's important that we step up. There's two very important bills that are going on right now. You've been a part of this. Tell us about these two bills. What bills are they, and what are they going to do?
Well, I'm here to talk really about SB 286 today and Assembly Bill 47 as well, which I'm not completely familiar with, except for the fact that it mirrors SB 286, and I've been involved with SB 286. Both of these bills, what they do is they close a loophole that's allowing rapists and sex offenders to be released years before they're supposed to be released. In some instances, hundreds of years before they're supposed to be released.
Well, we look at George Gascon, who used to be the DA in L.A. Thankfully, he's no longer. But rapists would rape a person and be back out on the streets the same day.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
It's incredible that that's the day and age we're living in. But even ones that get convicted now, they're being let out way before they should be let out.
Right.
We've got a big problem in our culture of men not stepping up to protect women.
Right.
And let's face it, we are supposed to be protecting women.
Yeah.
And this is a step in the right direction, if you ask me. Many times, bills like this, they die quickly. So where is this going right now?
Well, it's actually something incredible happened, and if I could just back up for just a second, Pastor Tim, because we talk about California, and it seems like such a wreck here, and for sure, there's a lot of things that are a complete wreck. And I think for a lot of people it seems hopeless, but I just want to stop and say it's not hopeless. When men like you and I stand up, when pastors stand up, and when we begin to lead our sheep, there's a lot of hope because there's hope in Christ, right? And there's hope in righteousness. And I've had a lot of glimmer of hope recently, right? I think you're familiar with Matt Capilouto. We saw what happened last year, right, with Prop 36 that passed overwhelmingly. Why was that? Because righteous men stood up and said, hey, we need to do something, right? And the state of California, I wouldn't say the people in Sacramento, but certainly the voters are really starting to wake up. And I think it's because there's pastors that are rising up. And I'm here to be one of those pastors today. And I want to encourage pastors to rise up. We'll often use Proverbs 31:8, being the voice for the voiceless. We use that verse when we talk about abortion often, right? But I want to talk about those that have been raped today. Being the voice for those that have been raped. Because when they have to be their own voice, they're re-victimized over and over again. Right. And that's what began to happen a few years ago, right before COVID, when some laws changed. And they created this loophole for rapists to be released. As men, we need to stand up, and we need to be the voice for the voiceless. I got involved with this particular issue because as a man, I've got to stand up for what's right. We've got to stand up for the righteous thing. And I was having a conversation with someone that I know very well, and she was telling me about her best friend who was raped at the age of 13 for an entire year. This is what happened to Mary. Mary was taken into the foster care system, removed from her parents, and then the county placed her under the care and supervision of an uncle and failed to notice that that uncle was a 4-time convicted rapist. Then Mary was raped for over a year by that uncle until it was found out. That uncle subsequently was given 170 years in jail, in prison. But because of these laws being changed, she now has to go before a parole board every 3 years and fight for him to not be released. All because he's turned 50 years old and he's served more than 20 years in jail. That's the current law. That was changed a few years back, right before COVID. If you remember, during the COVID years, during the shutdown years, there were about 7,000 prisoners that were released at one time, right around 2022 or so. These were folks that were released with these new laws. And now what's happening is people are coming up for parole because of these laws, and victims are having to go and face their accusers. They're having to go and retell their stories in front of these parole boards. And for me, as a man, it's horrendous to think that a woman would have to go over and over again and face her rapist. And that's just me as a man. But now as a pastor, what happened is I became involved as I was told this story, and I started making some phone calls. You and I have friends in government, right? And I started calling whatever senators I knew, whatever assembly folks that I knew, started trying to get people involved. And when she heard that, she came to my church. She doesn't live in this area, but she came to my church. And on that Sunday morning, she rededicated her life to the Lord.
Amen to that.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
She had lost hope in the church. She had lost hope in a Christ that could actually do something on her behalf. But when we got involved, she realized, wait a minute, this is not hopeless, because there are righteous men out there that are willing to stand for them.
Yeah.
So this is how I became involved in Senate Bill 286 and now Assembly Bill 47. We went to Sacramento then to speak on her behalf. She was there as well, but I didn't want her to be alone. I wanted her to at least have one pastor there. I wish there would have been more, Pastor Tim. But I was there, and we prayed. We held a prayer vigil there on the steps of the Capitol building in Sacramento. We held a news conference the next morning, and then we went and testified on behalf of the bill. And something miraculous happened. It passed. It passed the safety committee, 6-0. Everyone voted because it's such a common sense bill. But I also believe that we've got some folks in Sacramento running scared, because the population of California is beginning to shift. And how could they vote against such a common sense bill to keep rapists in jail that were given sentences of 170 years? We had a lady there. Her rapist was given a sentence of 300 years, yet he's up for parole. I've heard of a story of a young man. His rapist was given 700 years, Pastor Tim.
Wow.
How could he be up for parole? Can you only begin to imagine what that rapist did? And now he's up for parole, and now this young man has to go and testify against him over and over again, perhaps for the rest of his life, with the threat that that rapist can come out to the streets. It's not okay. It's not okay. We have to be the voice for the voiceless. We have to step in. So both of these bills have made it to the Appropriations Committee. SB 286 was seen by the Appropriations Committee yesterday, and they have placed it in suspense, which, my understanding, means they haven't killed it, but they haven't approved it, and it'll go for a vote at some time in May. We would have liked for it to have just been approved, but what we need people to do now is to make phone calls. Call your senators, call your assemblymen, ask them to approve and vote for this bill, both SB 286 and AB 47. We need people to stand up. Our voices need to be heard, because I'll tell you what, there's opposition there. As incredible as that may sound, there's a lot of people opposing these bills.
Yeah. I was talking with Pastor Kevin O'Connor, the Ark, mutual friend of ours, the Ark Church there in Redlands.
Yeah.
And the opposition he's getting, just trying to remove porn from our children's eyes.
Isn't that something?
That there are people that are demanding the right to put that in front of our children's eyes.
Right.
Now you've got people demanding that people get let out hundreds of years early, and demanding that women have to go and face their rapist over and over and over and over again. The fact that there are people that are doing that is appalling. But you're absolutely right. There is a turn that we're seeing here in California, and it is something we need to be aware of. We need to be a part of. We need to get this to continue. We need that type of momentum to continue.
Right.
I think a lot of people, when we saw Donald Trump win in this election, we saw him get inaugurated. We saw him start that first 100 days that are now over.
Right.
But we saw him doing all these things he promised he would do. I think there's this part of the Christian community that goes, okay, we can kind of rest now.
Right, hands off.
Now is not the time to rest.
I agree.
We need to be very engaged. That momentum will die off if we don't continue to push forward. So getting on the phone, I think a lot of people think, well, my one phone call won't matter.
Yeah.
What do you say to that?
They're absolutely wrong. I mean, we've seen it work. I know for sure that us making the phone calls prior to SB 286 going in front of the safety committee, making the phone calls, going and sitting in front of these senators, having the conversation with them, asking them to pass SB 286 made a difference. We could tell just speaking to them that it was making a difference. So I think the iron is hot right now, not just for this bill, but for many others, many other conservative bills. And we need to strike while the iron is hot. We cannot sit back. It would be a travesty for us in this moment when things are starting to move in our direction, to move in a conservative direction. It would be a travesty for us to just sit back and think it's all going to be fine moving forward. It's not. We have a lot of work to do, and our voice can be heard. It should be heard, but it won't be heard if we don't speak up.
Right. You said something that really hit me. You said that you wanted more pastors there, but there weren't more pastors there. Again, talking to Pastor Kevin O'Connor of the Ark Church in Redlands, their church got attacked. They got spray painted swastikas all over their church.
Right.
And there were some area pastors that called him up and said, hey, can we get you a new sign? How can we help financially with this? Right. They wanted to help him, and God bless them for that. I'm not trying to disparage those pastors, but his request was, no, don't help us with the sign. Join us in our fight against the pornography being placed in the front of the eyes of our children.
That's right.
And they go, oh, we don't do that.
Yeah.
We don't engage in that. My personal story, I was one of those pastors until I met a mutual friend of ours, Jim Doman.
Right.
I was one of those pastors. It's like, well, that's the politics stuff. We don't do that. We're not supposed to do that. And I remember sitting across the desk from Ken Calvert, not knowing who he was or what he did. Yeah. And he said, Pastor, do you have a question for me? And my question was, who are you? What do you do? Right. Not knowing he's Congressman Ken Calvert. He represents the district I live in, the district I pastor in. Right. And God's word says, and I have preached, that we're supposed to pray for all who are in authority, that we can live quiet and peaceable lives in all godliness and reverence. And here's a man that is in charge, that does have a vote in how I'm going to be able to live my life, in all godliness and reverence. I've got this man who I should be praying for, and I don't even know who he is. Yeah. So I really got convicted to get involved in this process. Here we are, and there's still pastors that just go, well, we don't do that. What do you say to those pastors?
I say it's time to wake up. It's time to start really fulfilling your duty as a pastor. I was having a conversation with another pastor just a few days ago, and I asked him this. I said, if a stranger, if one of your sheep or even a stranger came to you and said, I'm hungry, what would you do? You'd give them something to eat. If a stranger or one of your sheep came to you and said, I'm thirsty, what would you do? You'd give them something to drink. If one of your sheep or a stranger came to you and said, I'm naked, what would you do? You'd give them something to wear. But if a stranger came to you, or a sheep of yours came to you and said, I was raped, and I was promised I'd never have to see my rapist again, but there were some laws that were changed in evil ways, and now I have to face my rapist every 3 years. What would you do? Are you going to give them something to eat or something to drink? What would you do? Would you not just be the man that God has called you to be and be their voice? Stand up. make their voice be heard through you. You've been called by God. You've been called to direct people to righteousness. Could you do that? Could you do that when that person comes to you? And then I followed it up with this. I'm a pastor, and I'm with my sheep all the time. And once you establish relationships with people, they begin to tell you their stories. I've heard so many stories, Pastor Tim, of people that were sexually abused as children, people that were raped. I started trying to tabulate the other day, and I came up with no less than 12, 13 people that I know of in my congregation that have shared their stories with me of sexual abuse and rape. These people are in our churches. They're going to have to face this issue, and we need to be their voice. We need to be their voice. We should not allow them to be crushed by our justice system. We need to ensure instead that there's justice coming their way.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of pastors that go, but yeah, I get it, but that's politics, and we're not supposed to be involved in politics. That is something I hear quite a bit.
Sure.
There's fear of losing a 501c3.
Mm-hmm.
There's fear of the government coming in and doing something. And here's what I would say to them. God's created every pastor differently, certainly. Right. And there's certain pastors that, like me, I'm not an evangelist. I look at Greg Laurie. Okay, that dude's an evangelist,
right.
Clearly. God didn't create me like him. And, I do get involved in the political arena. You clearly do. God's created us different. So I'm not asking every pastor to be just like me,
right,
or just like you.
Yeah.
But what I am asking is to at least find somebody in your congregation that can do that for you.
Yes.
The thing is, if they would do just 1/10 of what you're doing,
yeah.
Who's the IRS going to go after? If they're going to go after a 501c3, they're going to go after you. They're going to go after me before they go after somebody else, right? They're going to go after the pastors who have been very, very vocal and very, very engaged.
Yeah.
They're going to go after us first. But the question is, have they?
Not that I know of.
Here's the thing. There's a whole website devoted to trying to get my 501c3 taken away.
Okay.
The whole website.
Okay.
Legitimately, go and look it up, and it's like, yep, get rid of his IRS. He's a violation of. He should have his 501c3.
Yeah.
Here's a whole form letter. Send it in the IRS, and people do. They
Yeah.
send it in the IRS, and have my 501c3 gotten taken away? No. Has yours?
Nope.
Nope.
No.
So we're not asking people to get as involved as we are.
Yeah.
But just do something.
That's all we're asking people to
Yeah.
do, and I think you're hitting the nail right on the head. Could you at least support the people that are coming to you, like a Matt, like a Mary, and saying, I want to do something about this.
Right.
What do you think, Pastor? Could you at least say, that's the righteous thing for you to do? I'll support you.
Right.
I'll support you in prayer. I'll support you in any kind of way that I can support you. I'll take some money out of my own pocket. I'll buy an airplane ticket for you to go to Sacramento or to go to Washington, D.C. I'm going to help you out. Even if I personally have to do it, but I will be there to back you up. I'm not even asking pastors to go write a bill. Right. I didn't. All I've done, Pastor Tim, is put my arm around people and say, I'll be here for you. Yeah. How do you need me? How do you need me? You let me know and I'll be here for you. That's all I'm doing.
Yeah. We can leave the bill writing up to Senator Brian Jones.
That's right.
He can write the bills.
That's right.
But we gotta make sure people know about the bills.
Yes.
And how to vote on these bills. And that's I think where we come in, because
100%.
We can have and even still also the pastor that goes, well, I don't want to be involved in reading the bills and know what's wrong. Okay, well, find somebody in your congregation that can do that for you.
Agreed.
And that person can bring to you and say, hey, here's a list of the bills. Here's what's godly about them. Here's what's ungodly about them, and let's just let the congregation know.
That's right.
So it's not a lot of work, but it's important stuff.
It is.
God's blessed us to live in this fine nation.
That's right.
This is a constitutional republic. We have local control, and we need to exercise that local control.
That's right.
And it's a stewardship issue at this point. God has blessed us to live here. We have a stewardship responsibility to use our voice to ensure truth and righteousness. And that's something, sadly, many pastors have abdicated their responsibility on. I was one of them for a while.
I was the same, right? Did I speak about, hey, you should vote? Yeah, kind of very surface-like, mm-hmm. right? You should vote. And did I try to steer people in a conservative way? Sure. But then there came a moment for me where I was wrangled in by Jim Delman as well.
Mm-hmm.
I received an email from him saying, "Hey, Pastor Mike McClure is going to go in front of a judge tomorrow," was what the email said. Would you please pray for him, because he's going to find out, besides the $3 million that he had already been fined, he's going to find out if he's going to jail tomorrow. And Jim also put in that email, if you're in town in San Jose, please stop in and pray for him personally. Well, I was 7 hours away. I was here locally, sitting in my office when I read the email, but I closed my laptop, packed a bag, a shirt, and some pants, jumped in my car, and drove to Sacramento because I wanted to be there for a man that I'd never met before. But he's a pastor like I am.
Right.
His church was open like mine was, and I wanted him to know that there was at least one guy. I didn't know who would show up and not show up, but at least one guy from Southern California that would make the drive to pray for him.
Yeah.
And it changed my life, Pastor Tim.
Yeah.
Because there was only maybe 20 pastors in that room. And here's a pastor that's facing jail time.
Right.
And I thought to myself, what in the world has happened to America? Our pastors are asleep at the wheel.
Right.
We all should have been there. Now, granted, it was a last-minute email. Right? I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. But it certainly changed my life.
Yeah.
It made me know and understand that we needed to be a lot more awake to what was currently happening and available for the Lord to use.
Yeah.
Even in the area of so-called politics.
Right.
I call it righteousness and unrighteousness. Why don't we just live in that space?
Right.
Why don't we just focus on what's righteous in our government and what's not and speak into it?
Right. You know, we hear a lot from the opposition, you know, you Christians just need to be more loving. And, you know, we look at a bill like this, it is a total act of love.
Yeah.
To stand for this bill.
Yes.
It's an act of love.
Yeah.
And we need to be doing this. If we love the women in our congregation who have been raped, we will stand for this. So it's so important. I really hope that everybody gets involved. As you said, call your senators, call your assembly members, let them know. Again, the two bills?
SB 286 and AB 47. They've both made it to the appropriations committees at this point.
Okay. Yeah, so we need to get on the phone, make sure that our voice is heard, make sure that nobody tricks us into believing that our voice doesn't matter. It absolutely matters.
Right.
You've been very involved in not just this, but so many things. How can people follow you, and how can people attend your church?
Well, you can follow us at Citywide Mosaic on Instagram, and we're in the city of Temecula, Mosaic Christian Church. There every Sunday, and we get together about every day of the week in small groups. You can follow us there as well.
All right.
And our website is citywidemosaic.org.
Awesome. Well, Pastor Jose, thank you so much. Thank you for all you do. I count it a blessing to know you and be called your brother.
I appreciate it, Tim. Likewise, man. Thank you so much.
All right. And I just want to thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you check out Pastor Jose and his congregation there in the city of Temecula. He's a true man of God. Also want to remind you, if you would, head over to ourwatch.com, subscribe, become one of our watchmen. We would truly appreciate that. One of the benefits of being a watchman is you get into our Wednesday night lives and our Friday night live events that we have. You get in early. And we've got our next one coming up May 21st with Rabbi Jonathan Kahn. You're not going to want to miss that one. Also, if you like this video, please share it out with your friends, your family, your neighbors. Make sure you send them over to ourwatch.com. That way they can know everything we got coming up. So that would truly be a blessing to us as well. God bless you. We'll see you next time right here on Our Watch with Tim Thompson.